Welcome, Dr. Jodi Aman, into the podcast today. I'm so honored to speak with you, and I know this can be so beneficial to everyone who's listening.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait to sometimes we have these conversations and you never know what we're going to get to. So I'm excited at the beginning here.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I love. You never know what's going to come out of here. But what I want to start with is I always love to hear people's stories and where they started from and what brought them into the work that they do today. So I would love for you to share what's inspired you along the way and what did your journey look like?
Well, I really decided to do this work when I was a teenager. So before I decided I want to help other people, I wanted to be an architect. I love design. I still love design. I love creating space that's beautiful, but I volunteered when I was in high school. I volunteered for a latchkey hotline. So kids who were home alone and lonely, they would call up this hotline, and there were usually teenagers and young adults who answered the phone after school. And I was one of them. So, I would build these relationships. And there was other things that I did. I volunteered a lot. I loved it. And I think it healed me because I had my own family chaos when I was growing up. And it's really interesting. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family, and in a lot of ways, it was great. But there was some things going on, like everywhere, right? And so, it just felt really invisible to me. And so, in helping others, I found a lot of healing. I found a lot of healing even in my anxiety. So I had anxiety from a really young age. I cured myself when I was in my 20s. I was already starting as a counselor when I was struggling with my anxiety and my panic attacks. And I was like, I'm supposed to be helping people and I'm like the worst. I would sit around a table with the other social workers and psychiatrists and nurses, and we talk about our cases, and I was like, I'm worse than what everyone's talking about, So I do write about my story in my books. This is You Want Anxiety Zero. It's my first book on anxiety, and it gives you the 5 steps to curing anxiety. So once I cured myself, then as a counselor, as a psychotherapist, I started helping others with the same process, and it works. And then I've been doing this for 28 years, so I've seen anxiety skyrocket. Unfortunately, knowing how to help it, you would think that it goes down. And we do have a lot of tools that we didn't have when I was young, a lot of ways to help people. And yeah, but we could talk about it a little bit. Like, why is mental health problems skyrocketing instead of getting better if we know how to help?
Yeah, I definitely want to dive into that. And I just want to go back to something you said, just saying how, sharing how you were dealing with your own anxiety and then you're in a group of people that are helping others. It's so profound that when you're going through some of those struggles, you have a deeper knowledge and understanding of the nuances that you experience when you're actually going through it. And it's like you're best suited to help that past version of yourself when you are going through those struggles. How have you found that, especially early on, the experiences that you have helped you form these bonds with some of the people that you've helped now?
Yes, and it's so impactful because people think of me as I get it, and they know quite quickly when we're having a conversation, when they first come into my room, or we're meeting online, wherever we're meeting, when they first start talking to me, they feel gotten. They feel like, how it feels when someone gets you?
Mhm.
We don't
Yeah.
have that experience that much in this world now. And so to feel like someone gets you, and I could guess those negative thoughts that are going in your head, and they're like, how do you know what the thoughts going in my head? And they're such common thoughts, but to them they are so unique, and they feel like they're the only ones thinking them, you know and so that, and also people, like, I've been on YouTube for almost 20 years now as well, and people are like, she gets it, she understands. And that is so powerful, because most of the time people who have anxiety or stress nowadays, other people have it too, but you still think yours is different somehow.
Yeah.
And you really still think, because they wouldn't act so good, because people, it's invisible, and people on the outside act a lot different than they're feeling inside. So they're convinced that I'm worse. But it's really important for them. And then there's a lot of therapists out there that are just coming from this expert knowledge, and they're very, traditional, and there's no warmth in that.
Mhm.
And, and it's really like teaching them, well, you have this is the way your brain's wired. Please don't tell that to somebody who has anxiety, that this is the way your brain's wired and you just have to learn to manage it. No, that's not really the truth about what's going on. This is a regular human response to our world, and we can do something about it once we realize that and stop beating ourselves up because we have anxiety, and then we can know what to do to cure ourselves.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think such a huge part of that is that empowerment and realizing that the brain is always adaptable. And no matter how long you've had anxiety, you can change that and you can rewire it. I think that's the profound thing about the brain is like how amazing it is responding to new stimulus. And I want to
Yeah.
go back to something you were saying too, with the increased rates of anxiety that we're experiencing today, what do you think are the biggest contributors to that? Because so much money is poured into the medical system and trying to help people, but yet we're still seeing rates skyrocketing regardless of the amount of money that's being put in. What do you think are some of those big contributing factors?
Well, I think screens. I mean, screens by far has really changed the landscape of our mental and emotional health and relational health, right? And physical health, really. I mean, it's really affected us on so many levels. Let's add spiritual health in there too. We used to do things in person a lot more, civics, and we're not. We
Mhm.
don't do stuff in person. We don't get involved in things. We're not even adults. So the young people, it's even worse. Yes, there's still stuff. But the other thing is with modern conveniences, we have a less chores. We have a lot less like survival chores or daily chores that we need to do to survive. But our brain was developed to do that. Our brain was developed to solve problems all day long.
Mhm.
Because in early human history, we had to solve problems all day long to survive. And so our brain has this huge capacity to problem solve all day, and we don't need it anymore.
Mhm.
Because we don't need it anymore, even in the last 50 or 70 years, we could go to the grocery store more than we could ever in human history. And now the food's already made, you know.
Mhm.
At least 70 years ago, you went to the grocery store, you still had to come home and make everything, and you didn't
Mhm.
have a mixer. You had to, you mixed it. I mean, so without these things, we're losing touch with our personal agency. We're losing touch with the fact that we have skills, we're adaptable, we can do stuff. We don't watch ourselves do it anymore, and we definitely doubt that we can handle things. And so that's the biggest culprit is like, I don't know if I can handle things because you don't see yourself as skilled. You don't see
Mhm.
yourself as adaptable because you're not using those things all the time. And when you're not doing hard things all the time or figuring things out all the time, first of all, there's a lot of brain space to go into negative thinking. But also, you are, when you do have a challenge, the resistance is huge because you're not used to doing it. So it's much harder. So even
Mhm.
and a challenge sparks our mind. We love to be challenged. We love to learn new stuff. We love to explore and feel good about it afterwards. And so we're not doing that a lot, and it's turning into pervasive anxiety.
Absolutely. Yeah. That novelty of, you talk about that challenge and the feeling accomplished and being able to do those things. And I hear so many people here. I just feel like I'm on autopilot. I'm just living the same day over and over and over again. And it's sad because it's almost like we are just suppressing all our gifts that we have within ourselves to create something different within
Yet
our
we
life.
feel like we're doing more.
Yeah,
We feel like it's
exactly.
going faster. We're doing more. The pressure is higher, but actually, there's less expectations. There's like an idea of expectations,
Mhm.
but they're not real expectations. We don't have to fix our shelter. We don't have to grow our own food. So they're not like real grounded expectations. There's these like, you better be the best. So
Mhm.
no one thinks you're not good enough.
Yeah.
They're not real, but they affect us so hugely. So we feel like we're doing more, we're doing more, we're doing more, even though we're doing less because
Mhm.
of this pressure. And so, young people are like, when they get stressed out or when they get anxious, they try to take things off their plate.
Mhm.
But the pressure doesn't go away. These expectations to succeed or like to be perfect don't go away. So you feel worse. Then you don't get used to yourself having skills. First of all, then you're home and you're giving lots of time and attention to the anxiety. It's the worst thing you could do. You got to keep going out there. You got to, do stuff because if you don't, then that brain space, because you have an incredible brain, it's
Mhm.
gonna try to, it's like, oh, she might be in danger. We gotta
Mhm.
help her.
Mhm.
And it'll
Absolutely.
find something. And it'll
Yeah.
sound good. It'll sound like it's a really something to worry about. It
Absolutely.
hooks to something that we value. It hooks to like our children. So we're like, yes, of course I have to be worried about this. The best thing in my world right now is my child.
Absolutely. Yeah. And your brain, whatever's created in your brain becomes that reality. Your body responds to that. And then now that becomes your self-fulfilling prophecy and reality that you create in your mind. And you talk about that, we're just kind of keeping ourselves busy, but not actually accomplishing anything. And how much does that play into like our resilience with when we do have these stressors coming into our life, our ability to be resilient to them and to buffer them?
Yeah, I mean, I used to have someone be like, well, when you have anxiety, you're like waiting for the other shoe to drop and you're really afraid of doing anything because something bad might happen. And so you spend all day like in this anxiety and panic attacks thinking about something bad that's going to happen. Or you go out there and you make friends and you do things and you learn new skills and because we think that that's real. Like we don't want to be caught off guard. We don't want to be shocked or blindsided by something bad happening. So we need to be vigilant. And so we stay vigilant, stay in anxiety, we isolate ourselves and focus. So we're vigilant if this bad thing happens. But wouldn't you be more skilled if you had friends and you built a community and you built skills for yourself and you started to build your confidence and trusted yourself? Think about both of those scenarios. If the bad thing happened, who would be better off in that situation? Someone
Mhm.
who like hates themselves because they've been anxious the whole time and feels unworthy, or somebody who has confidence, has resources, has people. And
Mhm.
so that really changes things for people. They're like, oh, yeah, that makes so much sense, right? Why am I doing that?
Mhm.
Because the anxiety is telling you it's protecting you,
Mhm.
and it's not. And so you really have to be invited to see the falseness of that lie. I go over in my book, I go over 15 lies that anxiety tells and really helps people understand what they are. I also have a book for teenagers and I condense them into 7 lies. This is Anxiety, I'm So Done With You. It's a teen's guide to toxic stress and hardwiring your brain for happiness. So both of them have similar this 5 steps to curing anxiety, but yeah, but I speak to adults or I speak to young people in that voice. But
Yeah, I think it's so profound too. It's like when we think of everything that we think of as pure truth for so long, and then we can gain a different perspective when we see something outside ourselves and realize like, oh my gosh, none of that was true. And how do I interrupt that cycle? And
yeah,
like
it's
you
really
definitely,
helpful when you see it in somebody else or when you have
yeah.
a bit of a distance. Like sometimes we're so close to it. It just feels true. We believed it for a really long time. And it really takes this invitation from a distance to like witness it. And sometimes it's a little helpful to witness it in a story or a vignette about somebody else and you could relate to it. We're storytellers, humans. We're storytellers. So we learn through stories, we experience our feelings, we process through stories. And so it's really powerful way to understand yourself a little bit better is getting that distance and hearing about it from somebody else.
Yeah, 100%. I think that was such a big thing in my journey is like questioning those thoughts. I had never questioned them. I was just like, okay, they got to be true. But when I started questioning them, that's when things started to open up and dismantle some of those thoughts that I would be ruminating on for years. So it's so
Yeah.
powerful when you start to realize that those are not your truth. That's not who you are. You're just experiencing them, and it is for protection, even though there is no true threat that's happening at that moment. So yeah, it's such a profound awareness when you start to bring light to that. And
It's so our ego doesn't want to change, right? It just doesn't want to change. So
Mhm,
it will keep you suffering and
mhm,
anxiety or stress or people pleasing or whatever. It will keep you suffering to try to prevent some future possibility of maybe suffering.
mhm,
And once you kind of realize, like, what am I doing? Why am I trying to like be vigilant and be, and sometimes, I mean, sometimes there's a past experience of trauma, which does contribute to this. So it's not just we're like it's not like you just made that up and something's wrong with you. This is a physiological response to trauma. We can override it, but we have to first be aware of it. So I'm not blaming you if you've had this experience that you have to be vigilant all the time. Please be compassionate and understand where it came from, but know that there is possibility that we could override it and decrease those symptoms that the trauma brought forth, and heal. Like, people do heal.
Absolutely. And just going off of, just kind of what we were talking about, can you talk about how generational impacts that? And like if you have parents who have a certain belief system and then you're brought up in that and that affects your belief system, how does that impact your experience with anxiety? Again, with our subconscious beliefs being formed between ages 0 and 7, can you talk about how that can be something that's, subconsciously passed on?
Yeah, I mean, anxiety is learned,
Hmm.
like perpetuating anxiety is learned. Anxiety comes from a fear response, the sympathetic nervous system response when adrenaline is released in our body from some kind of fear stimulus. But the but what happens is when our adrenaline is released from that fear response, our prefrontal cortex looks around and says, "Is there danger? No, you're okay." But what's happening now, I'm going to get back to your question, but I wanted to give this background. What's happening now is people are looking around and being like, I don't see any danger, but I feel it. Keep pumping those hormones out. That's what's learned.
Hmm.
What's learned is this attachment to that, which perpetuates that adrenaline and keeps our anxiety high. If you weren't afraid of the feeling, if the adrenaline released, the symptoms of adrenaline that we all know, your heart races, you might have different breathing, you might get hot or cold, you have rapid thoughts going in your head because your mind's trying to figure something out. And if there's nothing to figure out, they'll just be negative rumination stuff. Have a lot of energy. We feel it in our blood system, right? We feel the energy because we feel like we want to like run around the house and stuff. That's good. Use your intuition, pace, like move, because we want to burn that off. But if we're not afraid of it, if we feel that adrenaline and we're like, oh, this adrenaline, I get it. I just saw a scary movie, or I almost got hit by a car, but I'm fine. It goes away really fast. If we're not afraid of the feeling, our parasympathetic nervous system, which is the GABA hormone, comes right away, puts the brakes on the adrenaline. But what happens is we're afraid of it, and it perpetuates, and it feels awful. So it makes sense that we're afraid of it. Of course, it feels like the worst thing in the world, and you feel really like you're in danger and something's very, very wrong. And so, of course, you're going to be afraid of it. Of course, you're not going to like that feeling. But that unfortunately does perpetuate the feeling. It's going to keep going because of that. And so that's what's learned. So if you grow up with somebody who has the regular fear response when there's a stimulus, and then knows how to override it, the kids would learn how to override it. If they have parents who are really worried about a lot of stuff, then they might learn to worry about a lot of stuff that's really passed down. But also with this young generation now, adults my age, I'm in my 50s, so adults my age had some work ethic when we were young, right? So we had cause and effect. We do work. We knew that we had to put in stuff to get stuff out of it. But this next generation, millennials, you see it a little bit, but Generation Z especially, they've lost that cause and effect. And most of that's the consequences of screens, because they like things are just happy just because, or traumas happen randomly. And sometimes they do, but sometimes there's a whole background to when trauma happens. And so you get that secondary trauma. So there is a little bit of that it's taught from our parents, but there's a little bit of the context of our world and the context of our phones, which give us messages constantly that we're powerless and worthless and out of control. And it's removing cause and effect, because marketers, if they want you to buy their product, you have to just buy it because you should buy it because you deserve it. But you don't have to, they can't make you think that you have to do work to earn the money and buy their product. They wouldn't sell as much.
Hmm.
So they're constantly, so I've watched this process for 40 years get more and more, because before TVs, we didn't have them ads, a billboard or something, not often. And then TV, then there was ads more. And now it's like 24/7. 24/7. That people have ads. We don't even know they're ads. They're like in the movies, you know?
Mhm.
So this marketing tactic has really brainwashed us into thinking we should just get stuff. There's no cause and effect. We've eliminated that. Trauma happens randomly. There's no cause and effect. People are perfect. Everybody's happy. They're filtered lives on there, right? This comparison culture, it just seems like they just woke up one day and they were on a beach and gorgeous. Like there's no cause before that. And so they're losing that concept, which we have to go back and teach them this concept and be like cause and effect, because it's being undone. And that is causing them to feel powerless. You feel
Mhm.
powerless 'cause you don't understand why
Mhm.
you don't
Yeah.
get what you want, or it's not happening the way you want it. You don't understand that there's a cause here to get the result you want. And you just conclude you're worthless. You just conclude you're powerless. You just conclude you're out of control. And that's when anxiety and depression, that's why our young people are struggling so badly.
Mm. Wow, it's so profound. And it's just like it's something like, you know, I'm a millennial generation, so like I didn't grow up with this and I didn't even have a phone until I was like in my 20s. And so I always say like I feel so bad for this younger generation of like having this experience because I would have struggled with that if I was their age because I didn't have the understanding or wherewithal, you know, in that younger time of my life to realize that this isn't real and these things aren't true and to be able to help myself in that respect. And how does a parent or someone who is in Gen Z, how do they start to navigate that where they can start to help themselves in this and not be sucked into the vortex of the phone and all the advertisements and everything that's bombarding them?
I think being transparent about what advertising is happening. I remember there was a book that came out when I was really young to help us understand. I think there's that buy now button, a buy now like Netflix series. I think that it could really help people understand what's happening. You know, the mechanisms that's making them buy is the same mechanisms that's making them feel powerless. And so, if they understood that, I think teachers should be teaching it in school. I think that parents should be talking about it when they're watching a movie with their kids. That's a great way. Again, you're at a distance, right? You're not talking about yourself. You're being like, oh, she was really frustrated. She didn't get that thing. She really wanted it. And she just felt like she was worthless because she couldn't get that thing. And then they could talk about those concepts of cause and effect. Like she could work for it and get it. But like, so that is helpful when you're thinking about those concepts outside of them through whatever pop culture or whatever. If they hear about it with a friend, if they see it on TV, those kind of things could help them understand what's happening, which will help them override it when it happens with them.
Mhm.
You
Yeah.
know, like that
Mhm.
concept development, it's constantly, adults kind of explaining this is what's happening. But I do recommend parents to delay as long as you can
Mhm.
your kids getting on social media, because once they're on social media, the phone usage goes way up.
Mhm.
And so even with kids, so the difference between a millennial and a Generation Z is that they had smartphones in middle school.
Mhm.
So you
Yeah.
seem to, so I have a son on both sides. So my oldest is a millennial, and my second and third are Gen Z, and that is a huge difference. You
Mhm.
know, it's just a really huge difference in terms of like my older one's got a great work ethic, but there's some other reasons for that, but and sometimes it's about maturing, that comes out later. You know what I mean? Like after their prefrontal cortex is completely
Mhm.
developed, at 25, like a lot of things change, I think. But yeah, so it's a really powerful thing, but parents really have to keep that awareness for themselves, keep that understanding for themselves so they could pass that along and help their young people understand, because they could override it. They have the mammalian brain, right? All of this is working on the reptilian brain, and just like black and white automatic kind of, you're worthless, you're in danger. And so we have to, if we knew could override this stuff with our mammalian brain, it helps us have access to that, because
Mhm.
it's all about beliefs. Like if you believe you can't do anything about it, you can't. If you believe you
Right.
can, then you can. And so that has to be taught.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's so important to have that awareness of you are still in control of your life. You're still the creator of your life. And it's not, you're just a victim to the circumstances or the phone or whatever it's portraying in your life. And I think that that's so absolutely crucial to have that understanding. And for that Gen Z that is maybe using the phone and they're showing a lot of those like addictive properties where it's spiking dopamine and then you're
Oh,
on it even
good.
more so. How do you navigate that with the Gen Z where there truly is a physiological becoming an addictive property to it, but also knowing what's best for them not getting sucked into that?
Yeah, I think having a break, having a daily break from the phone would benefit all of us. And so
Mhm,
if it's 1 hour, start with 1 hour, maybe during dinner or something like that, or homework time, have a break from the phone and extend it. And ask them, because if you ask a teenager how they feel, they
mhm,
do. Most of my clients feel better after a little bit of a break. After an hour or two of a break, they're reporting that I feel so much better.
mhm,
They might still not choose it the next day. Maybe someone has to still intervene and choose it. Again, their prefrontal cortex is not fully developed till they're 25. And so they're going to pick the thriving, right? They're not going to pick what's better for me in the long run. That's a little more complex. You need to be a little bit older that's why we need adults to
mhm,
still supervise till the whatever 20s, because they're going to make decisions on what's more pleasurable most
mhm.
often.
Yeah.
It's much maturity to decide, okay, this is the harder thing, but this will help me in the long run.
Mhm. Yeah.
That's like a mature decision.
Absolutely. And this I know, like, I mean, it's not even just Gen Z, it is everybody. I mean, you see everybody on their phone just scrolling, spending countless hours on that. And one thing that I've heard from many of my clients is like they're influenced by looking outside themselves to define themselves. So they're looking for validation, they're looking for comparison. Where am I compared to this person? Especially in the business realm, you see people like showing how many figures they're making and everything. And I did this
Yeah.
in 6 months. It's like, no matter whether you're, in your teens or you are 50 or 60, like there is still that comparison and that influence that's having on you. And how important is it to then be able to differentiate what you're defining yourself as externally versus going inward and creating worth from within.
I think when you start to do stuff, when you start to create or have a creative outlet in your life, then you're going to start to know yourself as someone who could solve problems or make decisions or figure things out. When you start to know yourself as someone who figures them out, then you're getting to know yourself. You have to be doing it. Like, do stuff with your hands, create something. Um, we need creativity. That's what our brain is wanting to do. How do we create our life a little bit better? What do we make to make it prettier? What do we make to give to somebody else? What do we make to eat? um, how do we design our room so everything's there where we need it? The plug is there as soon as whatever. How do we create things to make our life thrive more, to make connections, and that's what's going to save us.
Mhm,
Being creative and community. Like, those are what is going to save us. That's what's going to help us see ourselves, because we're not a self in a vacuum,
mhm,
right? So we're a self in relationship. And if we're isolated and this phone is the only relationship we have, like whatever we're deciding, we think of that picture of that person, or what their life is like, that becomes a reflection of us. But we are not a self in a vacuum. So if we were totally isolated, it's the worst thing for us. We're social beings. We're not supposed to be isolated. There's a lot of negative consequences on isolating yourself, which we then call depression and anxiety symptoms. But the really symptoms of isolation, that dopamine issue is a really huge issue with isolation. But if we're with people, we see ourselves reflected off the people around us. We're not a self in a vacuum. We are only a self in relationship. And so we need those relationships, especially with people who lift us up. Of
mhm,
course, we could have a relationship with people who are jerks or mean to us, and that's not really good for our sense of self. But we need to have relationships with people who see us, who lift us up. That's where we're going to grow that sense of the really robust sense of ourself and a really robust mental health and emotional wellness.
mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's again how our brains are developed. We were tribal. We were supposed to be supporting each other and,
Yeah.
you know, accentuating our strengths, picking people up in their weaknesses. I mean, that's kind of how we're formed. And we become, yeah,
Sharing the burden of
absolutely.
problems and
Yeah.
sharing the joys of, celebrations,
Yeah.
sharing the work, sharing the information, sharing the excitement, sharing the beauty. Like we were sharing. We're
Mhm.
social beings and we need that to thrive. And so our soul's craving that because it knows that we need that. And maybe we could survive different than we could in hunter-gatherer times because we couldn't. If you were left out of the community, you were dead.
Mhm.
If you were kicked out or something. And so now we still have those responses when somebody leaves us out or excluded from friends. We feel it so deeply because deeply in our soul, in our biology, it's like, don't ever get kicked out. But we don't have the risk like they did, millions of years ago. But
Mhm. Absolutely. And for somebody who maybe is listening to this and doesn't really have that sense of community, where could they start to create that in their lives? Like where could they develop that and create those connections that maybe they're longing for?
yeah, you have to join something. You have to do something because you want to. I had one client who got into bells, and there was a group that met once a week and practiced with their bells, like a choir. You could be in a singing choir. You could do a sports thing like adult kickball, or some like a yoga class. Even there's a group there, and sometimes people talk at the end. Sometimes it's a sit and knit club or a book club. Find something or go to a church, find something that you could volunteer somewhere where there's other people around. Join a committee that's planning an event because they
Mhm.
get together. Join a board or like a nonprofit board and help other people. Those kind of things are completely necessary, but we've almost all eliminated them. I mean, there's some people who are like so involved in stuff, and then there's some people who just don't do anything. And that's a culture of a family. So if the parents aren't really doing anything, then the kids aren't, and there's a stalledness, and they're not really happy, you
Mhm.
know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also too is our society is so like go, 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 multiple jobs, parents are working, both parents are typically working, trying to navigate all the things. And then it becomes this like exhaustion in general of like, okay, how do I add something else onto my plate,
Yeah.
which can also be really challenging.
It could be. It is. You're right. And then like maybe what about all these people working from home? They're so isolated. Like anxiety's going up because people are isolated unless they're in meetings all day or so if you are working from home, like get outside of work. Even if you're just going to the coffee shop and talking to the barista for a couple minutes, that helps. If you're isolated, it's like smoking a pack of cigarettes. Like that's what the research says. It's as dangerous as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day if you don't talk to anybody.
Mhm.
And so with all of this work from home, I have a lot of clients who work from home and their anxiety is really high. I'm like, we have to, this doesn't work.
Mhm.
And this is your anxiety went up as soon as you got this job. And
Mhm.
sometimes jobs are not that busy.
Yeah.
And then there's the opposite of like high functioning anxiety when people have really busy jobs. So their adrenaline's high all day and they get home and their adrenaline's really high still. And they're like, what?
Mhm.
Why am I anxious?
Yeah.
But so it's like the opposite. But yeah, so if people are isolated at work or bored at work, they need more things outside of work. But some people have a great community at work. They have great friends at work and they're talking to them and they wouldn't survive without that. Like we need that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's, hopefully this, I love the examples you shared, and hopefully one of them just sparks someone's interest and like, okay, I could do that. And it's like those little steps that make a huge difference when you do recognize like I can make the smallest change and it can still be integrated in my life and make a huge difference in my overall well-being. I want to take it kind of the opposite way. So I know we talked about the community, being around people, but what about the person who, there's always that suggestion like take a moment to yourself, sit quietly, tune into yourself. And for that person who experiences anxiety, which I know I struggle with this for, a long time, where it's like I can't sit with myself because I'll get into that rumination cycle. And it's almost like that fear response to even have that quiet moment because you're just going to keep on going. What could someone do who's listening to us who struggles with that. Like, I want to be able to sit quietly. Meditation, quote, doesn't work for me. You'll hear that a lot. What could that person do to help quiet their mind and get into a space where that quiet time by themselves actually becomes beneficial?
Yeah, I think sometimes there's too big of a gap. If somebody's in a state of a lot of panic attacks, like they're just kind of having an episode of anxiety in their life that's really high, it snowballs.
Mhm.
We want to reverse it before they do that. And reversing it, it depends on how intense they are. So if I'm working with somebody and their anxiety is in this period of time really, really intense, we want to reverse it the other way. And I want them to do multiple things. Like I want them to have a recorded book. They're listening to a nonfiction book in their ears and cleaning out some drawers and stuff. I want them to have a project. I want them to have 3 different projects in their house. One that they have to source stuff for, one, a part, something fun. Nothing pressure, but something fun that they could do because their brain needs to do something, right? We need to stop the pattern of anxiety. So we need to put something else in there for short term. And this might only have to happen for like a week or two. Once somebody is feeling better and their confidence is coming back, or if they're in the place where they're just having some anxiety and stress sometimes, so they're not in that intense place, I wouldn't give them I wouldn't give them that advice. So I guess I would start with a guided meditation so they could follow someone's voice or the story of that guided meditation. And, sometimes you're like walking in a field and you're like letting go of things and you have a vest on and you look at it and like there's a story to it. So it gives your mind something to do. If they were doing breathing and they really scared of like when they empty their mind or try to meditate, the anxiety comes, we'll try to do like a patterned breath. If you have a pattern, it keeps your mind trying to do something. Or if you're staring at something like Tritaka, meditation is like a staring. You could stare in a mirror at your own eyes. You could stare at a flame, a candle flame. And that sometimes, or a pattern, it gives you something to focus on, right? So meditation is not necessarily clearing your mind. It's really focusing on one thing. It could be the breath or it could be the emptiness or um, but yeah, I had that experience too. I was on a meditation retreat, but I had a lot of panic attacks and it was like got worse. Um, but then there's when you build the confidence and you're starting to get over your anxiety, you want to not be afraid of your anxiety. Right,
Mhm.
because that's going to help it go away. It needs you to be afraid of it, or it needs you to be bothered by it, right? To perpetuate it. We talked about that at the beginning. But if you are, if you want to not be afraid of it in general. So as you're getting your anxiety down and feeling better and better, sometimes it's gradual. So you still have a little bit, but you're getting better and better. Then it might be great to invite time where you just sit with your feelings, right? If you sit with it, if you're like, oh, I feel the anxiety, I'm just going to sit here and observe it without putting any meaning around it, right? And when the fear is too bad, it's hard to do that. We have so many stories coming in, but you would have to like feel it without any story, without any meaning, without any being bothered, no attachment to it. And you could really get that last bit of anxiety gone. You could do this from the beginning, but it's a little bit harder to stay focused like that. You might want to build some confidence first. But if you sit with it and are literally not afraid and you're just feeling it, it goes away really, really quickly. It needs you to be afraid. Do you ever have someone come in a room when you're in there, you have earphones on or something, and they startle you? Like they start
Mhm.
talking, you didn't know they were there, and you're like, oh, you kind of jump.
Mhm.
And you feel the adrenaline in your body, right? And you laugh because it's really funny that you just jumped and screamed or whatever. How fast does it go away after you're laughing?
Yeah, fairly quickly. Yep.
That's how quick it could go away if you're not afraid. So that's the adrenaline, and it
Yeah.
goes away when you're not afraid of it.
Mhm.
So if you could sit like that, you might have to fake it till you make it a little bit, but if you could sit like that, that's why people still tell you to do that. Sit with your feelings. Because once you build up enough, it really helps you get rid of like the rest of it. And then it also is a great practice because then if anxiety comes again some other time, like months, you're fine, you have no anxiety, and months later, you go to a wake and you're like, oh my God, I can't imagine what that mom's thinking right now. And then your adrenaline comes, and you start to feel the adrenaline. If you were like, I get it. Thanks, amygdala. I understand why you came, I'm safe right now, but thank you so much. If I needed you, that'd be great. Like there's no attachment. It won't be like a whole other episode of 2 weeks of being anxiety because you're like, why is it back? Why is it back? Um, we have to take the mystery out of it. And when we take the mystery out of it, we can help it just go away. And,
Mhm.
all of these, my 5 steps to curing anxiety is in my book. You Want Anxiety Zero is the adult book. If you want it for your kids, it's Anxiety, I'm So Done With You. You really want to get these books and because you don't have to live like this if you're struggling.
Yeah, absolutely. And just allowing yourself to see that that's just information. It's very neutral, and to take that information and allow yourself to just say, okay, I have the strategies in place. I've been practicing this. It does put your body at ease. And thank you for sharing the strategies in the beginning with being able to sit with your thoughts and everything, and be in a meditative state. That was something that I struggled with, and it was those guided meditations that allowed me to kind of transition into being able to just sit. And so that was really helpful in my journey. So I can very much vouch for that, and breath work and alongside with that are very, very important. And so I'm grateful for everything you shared. And hopefully anyone who's listening can just take one thing and implement it today. You'll start noticing a difference. And for someone who want to connect with you, where can they find you?
My website's jodiaman.com, jodiaman.com. So you can find all my videos there. You can find all my books there. You get this download. I have this Generation Z mental health survival guide. It's a free download. It's a very comprehensive book. So go ahead and get that at least because that's going to really help you help any young person in your life.
Very good. And I'll put everything in show notes too. So if you're listening, definitely check out the show notes. And I just want to thank you so much for everything you shared today, your journey, and also for just helping anyone who's listening take the next step forward. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Kelly.